Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Explored. I'm Darius Namdaran, your host, with our new co-host, Joe Lee. Hey, Joe.
Hi.
Today we have got a guest who has a background in computer science, an unusual one. He did a degree at Glasgow University where he did computer science combined with theatre studies. And over the last 20 years, he's been involved in computing and education. To be particular, over the last 15 years, really focusing in on education and technology, focusing in on the more non-formal aspect of education like community learning, workplace learning, creative programs. Very involved with science and science centres. He even worked for the SQA, Scottish Qualifications Authority. I think that's what it stands for. So he knows about exams as well. And now for the last 8 years has really been focusing in on assistive technology, has his own business, helps schools and teachers understand it. And the reason why we brought Craig onto the podcast today is he caught our attention because he's going to be part of a Dyslexia Scotland education conference on the 1st of November 2025. And it's fully booked and it's for educators. And it sounded really fascinating what he was going to talk about. He was going to talk about dyslexia and AI. And we thought it would be great to have him on the podcast. Now, Craig isn't dyslexic himself. We're not talking in this episode about the dyslexia story of Craig, but we're going to talk about the dyslexia story of dyslexia and AI and how that story is beginning now and how that story might progress in the future. We're going to really be tracking that a lot in the Dyslexia Explored podcast as we go over the years to come. So, Craig, it is fantastic to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here. Craig Steele. I didn't say your name. Hey, Craig.
Oh, lovely to join you today. Nice to meet you both.
Thanks for being here. And Joe, thanks for being co-host. I'm looking forward to doing this with you.
Yep. The start of a new adventure. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a start of a new era of... We've been doing Dyslexia Explored for 7 years now. I think we're 200 plus episodes. And with you, Joe, it's going to, take on a new life and a new insight because you don't have dyslexia. I do have dyslexia. You're my co-founder in a company and you're also my partner in life as well, my wife, my best friend. So it's great to have you on this journey together and us, seeing it from different perspectives. So, Craig, over to you. Tell us, first of all, what do you know about dyslexia? Why are you talking at a dyslexia conference? You've not got dyslexia. Tell us a little bit about what your wake-up call to dyslexia has been in your life.
Yeah, well, my background, as you said, is in computer science because I'm a computer scientist, I'm a gadget geek, and I'm interested in all things tech. But what I'm really interested in is how can we help people get the most out of technology and use it to help them do whatever it is they want to do, whether it's, learn or whether it's get on well at their job or just be able to do all the things that they want to do in their life. So I've always been looking at how can we use technology to help people in those scenarios. And I've noticed over the past couple of years, AI apps and other tools are really starting to be used in learning environments more. And teachers are more interested in ways that they can use these in the classroom. Something that I've always done is teacher professional learning. So teachers who are wanting to learn how to use technology in the classroom. And over the past year and a half, I've been working with EIS, which is one of the teachers' trade unions, on courses for teachers which are about learning how to get the most out of digital apps and tools in the classroom. And that's everyone from primary school level right through to secondary and college as well. And really that's how I started to learn about just how good some of these apps and tools are at helping learners. And what I noticed is that, and I'm sure this is true with a lot of these assistive tools, is that they can be really good for people who are dyslexic or people who have other sort of needs that they would benefit from these tools, but actually they make it easier for everyone. It's actually something that can be useful for all learners in the classroom.
Great. And what was the connection with the Dyslexia Scotland conference that's coming on? Is that through the Teachers Union?
So again, through Scottish Union Learning, some of their members were also part of Dyslexia Scotland as well, and they had come along to some of the courses, and they thought this is going to be brilliant. How can we share this with more teachers? And they had an education conference coming up, so they said it'd be great if you could put together some of these tools and apps that people have been using and showcase them to our teachers. And the apps and tools that I'm going to be talking about at that conference, they're not all just coming from me. They're not things that I've said, oh, I think this is brilliant, we should use that. I asked teachers across Scotland to tell me, what are the apps, what are the tools that you're using in your classroom that are making a big difference to your learners? And those are the ones I'll be sharing at the conference.
That's great. I mean, without too much of a big giveaway, which sort of apps are you starting to see in the classroom?
Well, I've been thinking about them from sort of different points of view, because there are different tools for different scenarios. You're not going to get that silver bullet that hits everything. So I wanted to look at apps that support numeracy and apps that support writing and literacy, as well as apps that allow people to be creative with technology as well. And there's different apps that are really useful for different things. One of the ones that really stood out to me that, again, I had not experienced myself, but then as soon as I saw this app, I was like, I can see how that would be so useful, is one called Dyscalculator. Have either of you heard of that app?
No.
So Dyscalculator is a visual calculator that is free to use. It's just on a website, and it's specifically designed for learners who have dyscalculia, I think is the name. So the type where they find it difficult to read and understand numbers and process them as well. And what it's really good at is that it has so many features just built into this calculator, where it doesn't have your regular layout of a calculator where, the numbers kind of go 7, 8, 9, 5, they're in order of magnitude. So they go from 0 to 9. It can give you audio feedback when you click on these numbers as well. And it even does assistive things like it grays out the calculator buttons that you don't need at that point, so that if you're doing a sum, for example, it won't let you start by using a multiplication symbol. You would put in a number first. And when I started using that, I was like, I can see how this is going to be so useful to people. And the minute I showed it to teachers, they were like, this is going to be so helpful to people in my classroom. And I was just like, well, this is just an app that I came across online. And now I've shared it with other people, and they're like, no, we can see how that would help our learners immediately. And it was kind of at that point that I was like, actually, it makes sense that if I am going about, just in my own life, I'm generally interested in apps and finding new tools. So I might find something that to me is like, oh, that could be useful. I could see how that could be useful for someone with their writing or their spelling. And then I share it with a teacher or someone it might be a parent who is interested in how they could use it, and they immediately see that and say, do you know what, that would be good for my son, or this would be good for this set of learners in my class.
And how do you find it? I mean, we hear sort of mixed reports about tech in school and sort of schools' willingness to embrace it and it be available in the classroom. Do you think there's quite a shift now? Because, I mean, technology is moving on quite a pace, and there's some phenomenal apps out there. So are they integrating quite smoothly into the classroom experience for children?
I would say that there's more technology in the classroom now than there ever has been before. But what also stands out to me is some of the best tools are not standalone apps that you have to sort of download and get installed. And teachers face so many barriers when they have to try and get a certain app installed. It's not that easy. However, some of these operating systems, the things that are just built into the tablets and the phones and the computers that you use, have now got really powerful tools in them to begin with. And anybody can access them to begin with. I think of things like the iPad and the iPhone. Some of the features that are built into that are just, fantastic. For example, a good example that I used with a teacher recently is the ability for an iPhone to take a transcript of something that you've recorded and turn it into text is now just built into it. So what I mean by that is you can use the voice memo app on an iPhone or an iPad, and you can just talk normally. You can talk naturally. And then once you've got that recording, you can hit one button and have it immediately turned into the transcript. Now, it used to be that if we were doing that, we've tried out these sort of tools in the past, the voice to text tools. And we know what that was like 10 years ago. They weren't very good. They made mistakes. They couldn't understand some of our accents. And they would almost make so many mistakes that it kind of, like, it was quite slow. You had to have quite a good computer to be able to do it. You might have to buy an expensive software license. And even at that, it wasn't hugely accurate. So you'd end up having to like go and fix it and stuff anyway. Whereas now the ability that you can just do that on your phone and it is much more accurate than it's ever been before is so powerful. And the fact that teachers just didn't know that that feature was there. A lot of parents won't know that feature wasn't there. A lot of people who use their phone don't know that's there. And sometimes it's a case of letting someone show you how to use it. And what's really nice about like this workshop at the Education Scotland, what's really nice is that this workshop that we're doing as part of Dyslexia Scotland conferences, I'll have time to like take the time to show people where to find the tools and stuff. Because it's all very well someone just saying, oh yeah, you can do that. You just do it in this app or that. But people need 10 minutes, 15 minutes to be shown how to use some of these features that are built in. So again, that's something that I'm looking forward to doing at the conference as well.
Yeah, Apple's recent releases over the last, well, that release happened about 9 months ago. And have you used the one where you go into Apple Notes and you do the audio recording within Apple Notes?
No, I haven't tried it directly in there. Is
So
it pretty
it's
good too?
exactly the same feature that is in Voice Note. But the problem with Voice Note is you can get lost in Voice Notes. But if you do it in Apple Notes and you just click audio recording, it will do the voice note recording, transcribe it, and then embed it into an Apple Note with a heading in Apple Note and the audio all there. And you can extract the transcript from it or just read the transcript in the note.
Oh, that's
It's a
great.
really good function. And the other thing that's amazing is, have you tried when you're having a telephone recording, now on the iPhone, you can click record the recording and it will record the audio and transcribe it and put it into an Apple Note straight after your meeting with the name of the person you called.
That's really handy. And again, another example of what a fantastic tool Apple had built in, if only we told everyone about it.
That's
And,
right. Yeah.
you know, showing us how
Yeah.
to use it as well. There is so many of these features as well. Like I even do it for dead simple things like launching a certain app on my phone. Okay, so you know what it's like when you're looking at a phone and you've got all the buttons and sometimes it's not clear what icon's which and they have similar colors, and even the text sometimes is a little bit small, whereas I know that I can just trigger Siri, the voice assistant, and say open the Instagram app and it does it instantly now. Whereas, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, if you tried that, you probably tried it once and it didn't really work, so you didn't do it ever again. But now it's much more reliable as well. And I think what this is telling me is that some of the best features that are going to improve accessibility for everyone that do use AI, because things like voice recognition is AI, text to speech is AI, are already built into the phones and devices that we use. And sometimes it's just a case of knowing that they're there. And it might be a case of teachers showing it to their students or their pupils as well. Another AI tool that I found that's really stood out to me and I think will help with anyone who is wanting to improve their ability to read or to understand things and comprehend things is the opposite of text to speech. The opposite of speech to text, which is text to speech, having natural voice languages across as well. And the operating systems like Windows and the Mac and iOS now, the voices that they have in them now sound much more natural and sound much more human. And it's so much easier to have something like that read back to you when you don't feel as if it sounds like a really inauthentic or robotic like voice. You can hear it in a much more natural way as well.
And I think there's something really encouraging about that, you know, from what I'm hearing you saying, Craig, is how much is already available through some of the devices and the computers that we've got. And like you say, it's the gap between knowing that it's there and then using it. I think back to that sort of voice to text. We've got 2 children with dyslexia, and our oldest is incredibly eloquent when she's speaking to you. But one of her first challenges, especially as a younger child, was she couldn't actually translate what she was saying to you verbally into a written equivalent. So she'd tell you this fabulous story, and then she'd write down 1 sentence or 2 sentences. So actually, voice to text, if I'm going back a few years now, when she was at school, that would have been absolutely brilliant, because she could have spoken it out. There would have been a capture, and that capture would have then springboarded her being able to actually write the essays and the assignments. So, I mean, how do parents figure out, because I'm thinking from a parent point of view as well as a school point of view, how do you figure out what sort of functionality is out there?
So, to be honest, a lot of teachers and parents just didn't know. First of all, they didn't know the tools existed, so they didn't know that that was something that they were trying to look and find for. When we've been doing it with teachers, basically teachers had told the trade unions, for example, that this was an area that they wanted more support in, that they wanted additional training and opportunities in as well, outside of what maybe their school could offer them. So that was why it was organised through the trade union learning like that as well. It was a course that was only aimed at their not at their members, but people who were working as teachers. But I agree with you, like, how might parents learn about this stuff? I would say one of the first ways to start is both Apple and Google, so the 2 biggest manufacturers of phones and the topics, they have really great accessibility sections on their websites that you can read that have guides about all these features that are already built in. And that was some of the stuff that I did when I was starting to put together the course, because I was like, I know that there's great stuff on here and I've seen it, but how can I make sure that I'm not missing something as well? So that was a really useful thing to do. And even just playing around with some of the settings on your phone as well. Going into the settings app, there's usually a section that is called accessibility, and just working through some of those things and looking at what they mean. That's seems like very basic guidance, but actually sometimes that's what you need to do. You need to sit for 20 minutes one evening and just have a look and see what's on the phone. That's how I learned a lot of the stuff that I do on my computers in general. I'm comfortable playing about with apps. I'm comfortable seeing what's out there and, trying a bit of that as well. Because nowadays, sometimes people might be worried that, are they going to muck up the settings? Or are they going to completely destroy their phone? Nowadays, it'd be very difficult to really muck it up completely. And I suggest that it's worth checking out what you can find in the settings.
Yeah, it is amazing what is inbuilt in the assistive tech. Microsoft have got some amazing assistive tech. Google have got amazing assistive tech, and Apple amazing assistive tech in their own ways. I mean, for example, on the phone, if you swipe down with 2 fingers across the notch at the top, the moment you swipe down on 2 fingers, it will read out what's on the screen for you.
That's great.
If you activate that in the settings, 2 finger swipe down for that. And there's times when I'm reading, and I teach people this to do this in the workplace with dyslexia, is like, if you're reading an email on your phone, sometimes it's too small, sometimes you're just a bit tired or whatever. Sometimes it's better to listen and read simultaneously, because it helps you read faster, helps you comprehend it better, because you're hearing it in 2 channels. And so you just 2 finger swipe down, starts reading it out to you, Bob's your uncle, it's done. And there are so many of these tools around. I think let's talk about the intersection of AI and dyslexia, because the world where accessibility, assistive technology was siloed over into a specialist technology that was for people who had specific pain points, extreme dyslexia, maybe extreme ADHD, extreme, whatever different way of thinking you've got. And you had to pay a subscription, like you say, you had to download a different app. And even in the last 2 years, these transcription services, because AI has dropped in cost so much, it's now becoming bundled into regular usage. I mean, there was a point where you would hit the microphone button and do speech to text Apple, which is fantastic, by the way. That's another thing. On the keyboard, you've got the little microphone down the bottom right. Every time you open the keyboard, you tap that, whatever you say will be typed out wherever you are. But that would cut off after like 20 seconds, because it was so expensive for Apple to deliver it. But now you've got like a good 5-10 minutes if you want to just ramble on, Anyway, the point I'm making is that it's now affordable to make it accessible to everyone. And it's going to change the landscape for people with dyslexia in schools, because it's just going to become normal to do speech to text. It's going to be normal to have something read out to you, whether you've got dyslexia or not. Just some people prefer it,
That's exactly some of the feedback that the teachers have told us about how they're using it in the classroom. And one of the reasons why they like it is maybe in the past, pupils had to get a certain device, or they had to be using a very specific tool, which would mark them out as being, oh, there's something, different about you. You're having to use this. Or I think there was a teacher mentioned that for one of her pupils, in the past, she had to use tinted glasses, like coloured glasses, which helped her with the reading. But now that could just be done on the actual iPad screen itself, that you could set the colours, that you could set the font size, it suddenly wasn't, it wasn't a big deal. You weren't having to look different. Everybody was doing it on, on their own device like that as well. You weren't being made to stand out. And as a teenager, obviously that is something that many teenagers don't want to do. They don't want to be seen as being different in that way, or standing out in a way that they don't like. I think as well that, as you say, the habits of teenagers and young people is much more about, I don't know if you get sent a lot of voice notes from anyone, but like that is a much more common way for people to communicate now. They don't type it out, they use voice notes to send it. And it's a completely, acceptable way to do something like that as well. I think
Sorry, I was just going to say voice notes are definitely generational.
Yeah, I don't get too many. I'm luckily don't have to sit and listen to a 15-minute ramble. But yeah, now that the phones can translate it automatically, I could skim through it, I suppose, as well.
Well, that's another interesting thing, because there are some people with dyslexia who love doing voice notes because they don't like doing speech to text, even because they have to go and correct it and so on. And often with a voice note, you get the meaning that the person is sharing through the tone and the inference, whereas when it's typed out, it comes out strange in terms of how you read that text. Whereas when you're speaking it, you get, that's what that person meant, And then now you get a voice note that has the transcription of the voice note embedded in it in Apple now. If you're someone like Joe, who's like, I don't want to listen to someone ramble on for 5 minutes, I can read fast enough to go through it. Whereas me, it's slower for me to read it than it is for me to listen to it. So I want to listen to it because that's actually the faster way for me to consume. So it's nice that we've got to the point, or we're just getting to the point, I would say. We're not there yet, but we're just edging to the point where these two worlds of the linear thinker and the visual thinker, or the verbal thinker, the written thinker and the verbal thinker, the linear thinker, the big picture thinker, these worlds can start being dynamically translated at the same time, so that you don't have, like we've got an app called ivvi, for example. And what we've done is it's a mind mapping app that basically, from the audio and transcription in a meeting, takes the transcription, turns it into a mind map, so that you've got a visual summary of what's going on. But the important thing for us was that if you edit the map, we want the outline transcript to be edited as well. And if you edit the transcript, we want the map to be edited so they're synchronized. And that's one of the biggest problems with, like, if in the past someone said, I like taking mind maps, and your boss is a visual dyslexic thinker and they mind map everything, and you're maybe like, oh, I don't really like mind maps, but I'll turn it all into a Google Doc. And then you send the Google Doc over to him and he's like, God, I've got to turn this into a mind map to understand it. And there's these two different worlds sort of siloed. It's now able to be synchronized in real time.
And I think what you've done there is you've nailed one of the most powerful features of the type of AI everybody's talking about at the moment, the generative AI, which is that you can take the same piece of information, be it a lesson or a message, and you can translate it, you can transform it, sorry, is probably a better way, transform it into a different style that maybe suits you, whether it's an audio version, whether it's a graphic, or whether it's just taking, a bunch of text and turning it into bullet points as well. Being able to have that personalized to what works best for you is a good example, I think, of the power of AI for personalization. So the type of AI that I'm talking about there is what we talk about is called generative AI. So these are the things like ChatGPT and Copilot, and these are the things that are built into more of our phones and are starting to be turned on in different schools as well. And again, that's something that we've been talking to teachers about, how they can use their own notes, the stuff that they've already got, and either translating it for learners, transforming it for them from one style to another, or helping learners understand how they can use a tool to help transform it for themselves as well. Yeah. And I think that AI is such a big area, right? So sometimes people talk about AI as if, it is one thing, but you both know as well that AI is a whole area of study, like in the same way we talk about physics and chemistry as well. So there's lots of different ways that AI could be used to help people and to help us understand things better. And generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Copilot is one important area. But all those other things that we've spoken about earlier, like text to speech, speech to text, auto suggestions when you're typing something on your phone, are all examples of AI that actually we've been using now on our own devices over the past 10 years. But actually, over the past couple of years, you'll have noticed it getting much better as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think perhaps it is more the generative AI that people are not quite as sure about.
Yeah.
And because it kind of, I don't know, I mean, obviously we feel pretty comfortable with AI, but there's still that element of, now that you can interact with it, I think once the interface sort of came live, especially with ChatGPT, it suddenly became more real. It almost became, and especially when, I'll often hear Darius sitting chatting away with someone and I realize he's actually talking with an AI. and it sort of humanizes it a little bit, except that you've almost got that cognitive dissonance because it's not human, and yet your interactions with it feel very human. And I think that's the point where we're all a little bit sort of like, oh, AI could take over the world, or what are they doing with our information? Where's it going? But I think it's a great point that actually AI has been part of our worlds for a long time. And it's a bit of an inevitable direction of travel. But what do you think around the sort of ethics of it, children using AI? Because I mean, so much about children's controls on social media apps and all that jazz. What's the current thinking around children using AI?
So one of my areas that I'm working on at the moment is about the responsible and ethical use of AI tools in education. So that's either teachers themselves or young people using them as well. So I've been thinking about, what do we need to be what do we need to be worried about when we're using these tools? But we have to balance that against the excitement and the opportunity that those tools give us as well. And I think it's okay to have both of those thoughts at the same time. I think it's okay to be excited and interested in using it, but also concerned about where it might go wrong, whether that's from a risk and danger point of view. Like, is there a danger that a young person using one of these tools could generate something that upsets them or is offensive or something that we wouldn't want to expose them to? Or is there a risk that by using these tools that they become more reliant on them, that they can't think for themselves? Is that a concern as well? But we have to balance that against the ability for it to be able to do, for a young learner to be able to do something that they'd never been able to do before. So I think, for example, one use case of something like ChatGPT, for example, is people talk about how it could, say, for example, write an email for you. Okay. Now, really, that isn't what you should be using ChatGPT for in terms of actually writing the entire email from scratch to having a full email, because you would still have to like read through the entire contents of it and get an understanding for what is it trying to say. But if, for example, you took a few, maybe you dictate them or you write them down, just a couple of notes about what should be in the email, what the points are you're wanting to cover, even if they're just like very rough notes that you would understand, these tools, the generative AI tools, are able to take those and turn it into a much more eloquent, well-rounded version of that same email. And often it's not changing your voice completely. It is taking what you started with and helping you adjust it, helping fix the tone of it as well, maybe putting something in the right order. One of the prompts that I use with these tools a lot on my own emails is, I take my first go at an email. Now, I'm a professional writer, so I should be quite good at writing, but you know what it's like when you've typed an email, you read it through and you think, have I been clear? Have I made it sense? And I copy and paste the email, I put it into ChatGPT and I say, can you review this email for clarity, tone, and flow? And I get it to give me feedback. I read the feedback and I then learn from that feedback as well. Like, I don't feel as if it has replaced me from writing the email, but I feel it's helped me write the email, and it hasn't totally changed it from my own voice as well. And I think that that's an interesting example of, okay, I could have done it myself. I could have taken longer, but actually I've used the tool to assist me. I've used the tool to make it a little bit quicker as well. If I was someone who was not a confident writer, right, that wanted more practice at doing these types of things, I can see how some of these tools would give me the chance to do things that I would have never been able to do before, to write a more detailed email, or to have a go at creating something as well that maybe I've had in my head, but I've not had the confidence or the skill to actually put it together myself.
I know one of the things we talk to people about as well is asking AI, you know, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, asking the AI, how would you feel if you received this email? How would you respond to this email? Because I think actually when you're in a rush, you fire off an email and you think you're being really friendly and you think you're just making a really gentle request, and then actually, you know, the AI comes back and says, you have demanded a response.
Yes,
so I think it's quite a good sense check from that point of view to actually pop the email in and say, how would you feel as the recipient of this? And it feels a bit strange to ask an AI, like, how would you feel? Because then it's like, well, does an AI have feelings? But there's ways of, you know, it gives you quite interesting feedback before you've actually sent it to the recipient, and then you get that hard real world feedback, and then you've got to pull yourself back from that.
Well,
yeah,
AI
I
is
think
so good at role playing. You can actually tell the AI to role play. You know, if I was sending this email to my boss, or if you were a new customer, or if you were a disgruntled customer and I was sending, or if you were, you know, whoever, you can just give it a role and it will give you the feedback from that role. It's just so good at role playing feedback.
Yeah, I think that exact feature that you're talking about there, where you're getting it to sort of understand the tone of the email, teachers have told me that has been really good for some of their neurodivergent learners who have trouble understanding the tone of what someone has said. Like, that way, someone maybe hasn't directly asked them for something, but you know, they're expecting them to be able to read between the lines. So, like, I'm thinking of the example. Someone said, okay, so someone might say something like, would you like to do your homework first and then you can play on the PlayStation? To some learners, they might say, no, I want to play the PlayStation first. But what they maybe haven't realised that the tone is, What I'm actually saying is you need to do your homework first, and then you need to play the PlayStation, then you can play it. Whereas using an AI tool to read a message like that can actually bring it across about, okay, what does this person actually mean? What are they asking me for here? Or it could be saying, like you say, oh, they're being friendly, or they're just being polite, or they are quite serious about this as well. So using it to help understand tone is just another great example of having an assistant that can help you process something a bit better. And again, what a powerful thing to have access to if that is something that, you would benefit from.
And I've used it with students where students with dyslexia are maybe writing a story, okay? And it can be really hard for a student with dyslexia to write a story. They can be great storytellers, but they may not be such good story writers because it's time consuming. They might go around in circles. They might have too many characters. It might be too complex. There isn't necessarily a clear storyline, etc. And so often what you need is rapid feedback. And with dyslexia, often you need feedback in the moment while it's working in your memory, rather than 2 weeks later when the teacher has scribbled through it and done red lines down the side, and you look at this document and you go, I can't even remember when I wrote it. Did I even write this? And that feedback has no real value to you because you've got no connection to the original work, because there's been this disconnect. And so often with dyslexia, you need that rapid iterative feedback. And with AI, you get that instantly. And, I've even had students, we said, right, mark this according to the SQA NAT5 curriculum requirements for this kind of essay. Please give me the outline of all the requirements and mark it as if you are an expert examiner who is testing another examiner's marking. So I'll even say, you're an examiner according to the SQA, this is the mark. And then I'm like, right, reread this as if you are the assessor of the examiner's marking and see whether how much they're on point or not. And so you can go through as many of these iterative responses until you get, this kind of triangulation of feedback.
Yeah.
And it's not that you rely on the mark that you get, okay? It might be that you get a mark of, 56%, and then you go and implement some of the feedback and you get a higher mark of 64% or 65%. My goodness, I did that and I just got that much of an improvement. And it might just be a 5-minute rewrite. But that's the feedback loop that a student would often have to wait 2 weeks to get.
Exactly.
But they did it in 5 minutes. So they get it marked once, then they do one little change and they get remarked. 5 minutes later, they've gone up to 65%. And they're like, is that what you mean? And you go, yeah. Should we do some more? And they're like, yeah, bring it on. Do another 5-10 minutes. And they change it and they're up to 70, 67. Do another little change. They're up at 70. And they're like, wow. Now, their teacher might not mark them at 70%. They might mark them at 65 as opposed to 45 before. But the point is they're heading in the right direction and they're responding to feedback, etc., which is so powerful.
I think that rapid feedback, that being able to iterate on what you're doing to get, to go backwards and forwards and get better at it, is a really good use of the tool, where you still feel like, I'm sure you both have, when you're using these tools and you're using them well, you still feel like you're in control, like you are the one writing it. It's still your ideas, you're putting it through together. The tool is just helping you as well. And I think that say there's a parent who's thinking about, actually, I maybe these AI tools, some of the ones like ChatGPT, Copilot, could be useful, but am I worried that I'm taking away the independence of the person who's doing it? Is it just going to do it for them? If you play about with these tools, you'll realize quite quickly that you are still the one in control. It's still your ideas. And if you're using them in the ways that we've just been speaking about there, it definitely is about improving your work and not replacing you at all. And certainly not replacing the learning or the teaching as well. In that scenario you're describing there, the teacher is still going to be able to give feedback and support that pupil, but the pupil's getting additional help from the tool itself. And, and ultimately, the big difference is the teacher will know that learner more than anyone else. So they'll know exactly about what guidance to give them, how they will respond to the feedback as well. So that's never going to be replaced in any meaningful way with one of these tools. Certainly not in the recent not in the recent future. But I think that's just another exciting tool to have in the classroom. And for me, when I've been doing this with teachers, at no point has any teacher ever said to me, "Oh, I feel as if these tools are going to replace me," or they shouldn't be learning it this way. Most teachers are very open to the idea of how can I use technology to help me teach better or to help my learners get the outcomes that they want as well. So I think that that's an important thing. I also want to point out that there's maybe some parents who are listening right now who are like, "What are you even talking about? I haven't used AI whatsoever." And the reality is that most people in the UK have heard of these tools like ChatGPT and Copilot, but they've not actually tried it out themselves. Or if they have tried it out, they've maybe tried it out once or twice, maybe just like doing a couple of basic prompts, but kind of saying to themselves, "Nah, that's not for me." I would say that if you've only ever tried it once or twice, or you've not used it at all, it is worth giving it a go. This is something that really might make a difference to just what you do at home in your own personal life, but could really be useful for some of your family members as well. And I think that's fair to say that if people feel as if you've not missed out on the AI, like you've not missed out on the AI train yet, it's only just started. But as more people start to experiment with it and try it out, I think we're going to see more uses for it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was just making me think, I remember I hated maths at school. I mean, my school years are a long, long time ago, but I remember sitting through maths and my maths teacher saying, "Well, you need to learn how to do this for everyday life because it's not like you can carry a calculator in your back pocket." Well, I mean, obviously it's the ultimate joke's on them now, isn't it? Because we've all got a calculator in our back pocket on our phone. But AI is going to be is already in our back pocket. And so what does it look like for AI outside of the classroom as well? When, kids, I mean, our kids are sort of Gen Z, and then there's another generation after that now, but they're completely tech native. So AI is just going to be part of their world. So what does it look like for it to be outside of the classroom as well and the learning that's going on there?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that outside of traditional environments like a school classroom, it's actually so much easier to use different tools because you don't have to have the same levels of permission to be able to use them. So, or you don't have to worry about them getting installed. And especially if I'm doing stuff with adult learners, for example, if they have their own devices and we go into a workplace, they might have more flexibility about what tools that they can use, or they might actually have their own personal devices that they can put things on as well. And also with adult learners, they are on the whole more resilient to things. If they go wrong or if there's an issue with it as well, they can recover and cope from that as well. So being able to use this outside it, like when I'm thinking about how workplaces are using it, workplaces have adopted this much quicker than schools. Now that's probably that is quite normal from what I've seen in other sort of tech setups as well. But workplaces have adopted it because they know that it is helping their staff. They know that it's helping them do things maybe not necessarily quicker. I'm not always convinced that it makes you quicker, but it might allow you to do things with a better quality first time, or it might allow you to do tasks that you would have never had the experience in doing before, but you can use that as a way to help you do something as well. So whether that's, maybe you've not had experience of writing a newsletter article for your workplace, but actually using an AI tool, you can take your notes and help turn it into a draft of a newsletter article, which you could then tweak and change yourself. So I think it's a shame that schools don't always have access to the technologies that are available right now that are in someone's phone that they could be using to help improve their learners. Now I know that there's a million reasons why they can't do that, but it doesn't stop it being a shame.
So, there's so many things we could talk about. about dyslexia and AI, and I'd love to talk about more with you, Craig.
Mm.
But you come from this very unusual intersection where you're talking to the teachers union, you're talking to teachers, you're talking to schools. And I'd be intrigued, what are you sensing in terms of, you've talked about the teachers' eagerness to use these tools as much as possible. There isn't that resistance, but the impression we get from schools is that there is a resistance to it. Okay, there's a few things that are fascinating me. For a start, what AI models do you think schools are going to allow their students to be using in school, like generative AI, whether it's Google Gemini, a classroom version of it that goes with Google Classroom or something like that, or Microsoft Copilot for schools? I don't know what you're maybe noticing. And then the next question, we can do these separately, is really around assessment, okay? Because we're in this dynamic where, you know, a child can be told to write an essay. They write the essay at ChatGPT at home and they bring it into school, and there's no way to tell whether ChatGPT has done it or not. We'd like to think there will be, but it's pretty hard. And if you know what you're doing, you can delete all those extra long dashes and all those extra little artifacts that ChatGPT can put in there and make it look ChatGPT-esque, etc. So, you know, what's going to happen in terms of assessments in schools and so on? So there's two questions I've got in my mind. Which would you like to go with first?
Well, I think the first one is about, so what models do I think, what tools do I think schools will be able to access anytime soon? I reckon that it'll probably be the ones that are easiest to get turned on. So for example, if your school has already got an agreement with Microsoft, then it's much more likely that Copilot for Education would be turned on. Same with Google and Gemini. So I think that that would be the sort of the most obvious ones. And in some ways, that's good because that is the kind of like the standard tool that many people will be using in workplaces and stuff in the future. So in the same way that it makes sense that when you're at school, you should use things like Word and Excel because you're going to be using that at work, then it would almost make sense to be using something like Copilot as well. So I think that that will be the case. However, how far are we away from having more specialized models that are specifically aimed at school learners or learners in certain subjects as well, that have maybe been trained on more relevant examples rather than trained on millions of pages from the internet as well? So I think that that part of it is quite interesting. The assessment part, well, I'm not, although I used to work at SQA, I haven't really thought about assessment as much recently. But what I do know is that if we're going to be using these tools in schools, what they want to do is not to use an AI to actually replace the learning part of what you should be doing. So say, for example, we're having to write an essay about Romeo and Juliet. You really don't want to be using AI to do the work for you, i.e. write the Romeo and Juliet essay. But there's so many other ways that you could use that tool that would allow you to prepare your essay better, that would allow you to review, reflect on it. You mentioned some of them before. So it could be like, okay, well, these are what I understand the themes to be. This is how I've written them. Can you give me feedback on it? Can you use it to double check a certain quote that's in the play? Yes, but you might be better actually just looking it up directly yourself. So it's about knowing when to use the tool and when not to use it. If you think about the way that we all use Google nowadays, okay, so I think it would be mad if someone was to say you can't use Google in school anymore because we know how useful it is. But we also know that it is not enough just to Google something and choose the first thing that comes up. You know that you have to think about, how would I phrase that when I'm searching for something? How can I go down and make sure that this website looks credible? This looks like the type of thing I'm looking for. We all know that experience where you've Googled something and you kind of know what the answer is. So what you're doing is scrolling down and being like, nah, ignore that, ignore that. This is the one that I want as well. And we've gained that experience from actually using Google lots of times and getting it wrong and understanding it well. I think the same will be true with some of these AI tools as well. We need to play about with them. We need to use them to understand how to get the most out of them as well. And I'd be worried that in our schools, if it became a case where a curriculum had been written by AI itself without any human input, and then a teacher had used AI to generate lesson materials and questions that a pupil then just answered using generative AI that was then marked using an automatic assessor. Like, we will have failed at that point, but that will be a classic example of using technology in the wrong way to achieve the wrong thing. So I'm interested to see how it's going to affect assessment. But I think back to my time at SQA when I was in the STEM team, but one of the areas that I worked in was apprenticeships, traditional apprenticeships, so things like bricklaying, carpentry and joinery, roadworks. And, you know, for a long time, these apprentices have been assessed not necessarily by the most formal assessment methodology. So it wasn't always like you have to write an essay about how you made that wall. Sometimes you would make the wall and then you would have a chat, you would speak to them and you would get the information out of them that gives you the evidence that they've understood, that they have taken those learning points on board. And I know that teachers will be able to adapt their learning to suit that too.
Were they ScotVec at that time? Were you in the ScotVec
Oh,
era?
no, I
No?
wasn't. That was,
Yeah.
that must be before me.
Was that before your time? Because I did a bunch of ScotVecs when I was 21. I crashed out of law school at Edinburgh University in honours, third year honours degree. I crashed and burned out. And then I said, I'm going to go and train as a joiner. And I ended up doing 26 ScotVecs on how to lay foundations, technical drawing, building stairs, building stud walls, all the rest of it, that was run by SQA through an apprenticeship program. I absolutely loved it, and it served me so well since. And then I found out about mind mapping, and then I went back to my law degree and finished it. So I did both in the end, but loved the ScotVecs, and their approach was good, but it was interesting because they got all us builders in together into one room. And the teacher would come in and he'd go, right, okay, guys, you've got to do this assessment here, okay? And you got to write this in. And I didn't know I was dyslexic at that point. And probably half the guys next to me were dyslexic as well. It's 10% prevalence in the population, but, you know, in that kind of environment, you've maybe dropped out from certain things. So it's up to 30%. He left. He said, look, I'm just going out for a coffee, and you've got half an hour to fill this in. And he left the instruction manual on the desk for all 20 of us. And we all just went through it. Well, what's the answer to this one? Everyone just got, I refused to do it, but they all copied each other and got
I'm sure
pass.
the statute of limitations has passed now for that. I'm sure you're fine to admit that on the internet.
No, I for me, it was a question of pride, but because I actually knew the answers. If I didn't know the answers, I probably would have joined in. But this dynamic of having this dynamic testing side of things, okay, is actually quite hard to do. And that's the challenge, because we've gone to this systematic tick box, multiple choice, because it's efficient, but it's not necessarily effective. And that's one of the challenges with dyslexia is, and the reason I asked this of you is I had this conversation with Dr. Brock and Fernette ID, who wrote The Dyslexic Advantage. And we had this conversation a year ago, I think, and we'll put it in the show notes because we talked about AI and schools. And one of the unexpected impacts was it adversely affected people with dyslexia. And the reason why was teachers stopped allowing children to go home, write an essay, and come back.
And bring back,
Yeah. So the problem with that was, number one, a number of them had accommodations to be allowed to type their essays instead of write them because they got dysgraphia. Typing it means they can use spell check and correct the spelling and it be understood. And all of these kind of ancillary assistive technology accommodations that dyslexic students can get and have in their learning plan. But then the teacher said, no, sorry, ChatGPT, you got to handwrite your essay. And then all of a sudden, the person with dyslexia is like, What?
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, like, and that is an example of an assessment that is not reflective of the real life situations where you'd ever be required to do that. Like, in no workplace nowadays would you be told to sit and write in pencil within 2 hours, certain thing, without using any sort of other technologies to help you. One of the other workplaces I've done quite a few stuff recently is with care workers in the NHS, and they're looking at how AI might be able to help them at work as well. And some of them may be dyslexic, but certainly quite a lot of them weren't are not native speakers of English, the ones that I was speaking to, or they had poor confidence in writing skills. And often they were having to write formal care notes and care reports that would be filed as well. And we were working with their employers and with the trade unions as well to look at how could they use tools like ChatGPT or Copilot to take their handwritten notes that they would be writing when they're on the job in a rush, and then how could they turn that into a language that was more the type of language that you would expect to see in a care report, which is going to be a little bit more formal, a little bit more structured as well. And also, part of that is looking at, well, how can they do it in a safe way? Because you wouldn't want to put confidential patient information into one of those tools like that as well. So understanding of when they could use it, when they might use it to help them rephrase something, but not in a way that they would be uploading patient details and patient records, which would obviously be a risk in the same way if you were to submit them anywhere online. So again, another example of using these tools to sort of not replace them, but make them better, make things easier for them as well.
Joe, you used to work in the care industry.
Yeah, slightly different area. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, Joe used to manage a care at home companies team, a large one, and did a lot of that. And one of the things that we noticed was there was a high rate of undiagnosed dyslexia within the workforce. I think once you get into the very practical realms of workplace, often a lot of people with dyslexia get distilled into that environment for a number of reasons, but in my view, two main reasons. Number one, because they don't fill in the forms or do all the paperwork or do all the admin or do the college or university degrees and so on that help them get other jobs. And so they get forced into much more hands-on jobs. And then so that's the negative side. But then the other positive side is that often people with dyslexia are really good at practical, dynamic problem-solving environments, which are often more hands-on, relational, because they're much more dynamic. There isn't always a standard operating procedure for how you speak with a person or what form to fill in for X, Y, and Z. They just see the problem, they sort it and get it done. But then they can be highly effective at it. But then when it comes to them writing up their notes on how they did that, whether they're a lawyer, a dentist, a doctor, all the way down to a care worker, regardless, all of these people can be very competent at delivering the result of their job in a dynamic environment because of their dyslexia. But then when it comes to the write-up, it can be appalling. I know people who have bad writing deliberately so that no one can see their bad spelling. So they make really bad writing so you can't read their words being badly spelled, so you can't actually read their writing, but they've written it. And there's this, so there's lots of different ways people trying to compensate, cover up, without even consciously knowing that they're doing it, that AI could address in these situations. It's going to take it quite a few years. It's definitely got the capability, but it's going to take it quite a few years to figure out how it can fit in properly.
It's almost like it's filling in the gaps, isn't it? It's, we'd all like to think of ourselves as being really great at absolutely everything, but that's not real. And actually it's that sort of partly a self-awareness and then partly a professional awareness that actually your staff are brilliant at what they do, and they need a bit of help with some aspects of that, and then being willing to use AI to fill in those gaps. Because,
Yeah.
you talked about my experience in the care sector, like the carers that I worked with, absolutely phenomenal. And really, that's what you want. You want people who care, but also because it's a regulated environment, you also need them to be able to follow due process and document things and do everything. Now, if you're the recipient of care, you're going to choose the quality of care.
Yeah.
But AI could be used in that environment to help with
Totally.
some of the other stuff as well. So,
I think it's really going to be helpful in workplaces as well, like you're describing. And I know that there's all, again, through our trade union learning contacts, they are working with employers to be like, actually, you're going to have neurodivergent staff on your, how if you gave them access to these tools, this actually might make their jobs easier. This might might want to stay with you longer. They'll be able to be more productive for you as well. But actually, it's just about helping people. Like, as you said, I'm not going to be brilliant at everything. So if you can help them with the parts that they need that additional support with. You mentioned, Joe, like the calculator, like the fact that all of us now have access to a calculator. Okay, not everybody will understand the relationship between all the numbers and being able to sense check things, but certainly having access to that tool is not something that you would deny anyone of now.
Yeah. Before we wind things up, Craig, it would be really great to just look at some of the projects that you're currently involved in at the moment. You mentioned the Churchill Fellowship to me earlier. Could you tell us a bit about what you're doing with the Churchill Fellowship?
Yeah, so with the Churchill Fellowship, I'm doing a project that is looking at how are people learning about AI outside of traditional classrooms. So when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about things like workplaces or community projects or creative programs and science centres. And I've been awarded this fellowship, the Churchill Fellowship, which is allowing me to do some international travel to go and learn from people around the world. Because the idea being that I'll go to these places, I will learn from them, and I will bring that knowledge back to the UK as well. So the areas that I'm visiting: Finland and Germany and the United States, California as well. So if you are someone who lives in that area, if you live in Germany or Finland or the United States, and you're doing something interesting around AI in the workplace or as part of a creative project, or you know someone that is, then please get in touch with me because I'd love to go and learn from you as well. So I'm so fortunate because I'm getting to visit these countries and actually learn directly from people with the knowledge that I can then bring that back to the UK as well.
So you're doing this in general terms, not specifically for dyslexia, but it would be really useful to have someone with dyslexia to add a little dyslexia twist to it as well.
Exactly, because this is about all the different types of groups that are using it. And if one group is like, here's how we've really found it being useful for dyslexic learners in our workplaces, brilliant, I'd like to learn. Or maybe a community group that have been using it in a different way as well. So it's not specific to that, but I know people who listen to this have probably got expertise in all sorts of areas as well. So I'd love to learn from them.
Why is it called the Churchill Fellowship? Has it got to do with Winston Churchill?
Yeah, so it was set up initially as, after Winston Churchill died, members of the public donated money in his sort of memory, and this became the sort of the foundation that they created, the fellowship. So what they do is every year they use that money to support educational projects that are about going to different parts of the world, learning about a very specific topic. You have to put together, if you're a church, if you want to be part of this, you have to put together a compelling project that you want to research, and then you go through a whole process. And then if you're awarded it, then you can take part in it. And it is I'm about to start my first leg of it in Germany next month, but it's been a fantastic experience so far. And I'm so fortunate because as someone who is self-employed and run my own business, I have to look out for like opportunities to do learning. And if I didn't take the initiative to do it, there's no manager that's going to say to me, you should go on this course or you should get this opportunity. So I had to go out there and find it. So yeah, it's really exciting, but I also have to make sure I make the most of that opportunity as well.
we had Winston Churchill's grandson on the podcast who created
brilliant.
scanning pens for dyslexia. He's the founder of scanning pens. And Winston Churchill was dyslexic, a very famous dyslexic person, and his
Well, there you go.
grandson is dyslexic as well. So it's quite interesting to see that that kind of gap, that loop.
Well, one of his grandchildren is the the chair of the fellowship as well. So I'm not sure if it's the same one, but yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Great.
What was his name? Can you remember?
Oh gosh.
Is it Jeremy?
Is it? I think it's Jack Churchill. I'm not sure.
I
I'll
think
look it up on the podcast.
Yeah. You can cut that bit out, but there's loads. I think he's got lots of grandchildren.
Yes.
So I knew it'd be one of them, but not necessarily the exact same one that I met recently. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's what it's related to.
And you've got another project called the BRAID project, which I think you alluded to earlier on, talking about bridging responsible AI divides. Is that where BRAID comes from? BRAID? Is that
That's
the acronym?
Right. BRAID. Yeah. So it's a partnership project between, my company, Digital Skills Education, is a partner in it alongside the University of Edinburgh, the Ada Lovelace Foundation, and the BBC Research and Development. So it's about looking at how AI is specifically affecting arts and humanities and the creative industries as well. So you can imagine, with my background in both technology and arts as well, that was something I was really interested in. So we're looking at how can AI be affecting those industries. And I've actually got a course at the moment, which we're doing up in Dundee, which is called What Creative Professionals Need to Know About AI. So it's taking place at the V&A in Dundee, and local creatives and artists are coming along to learn about AI, learn about how they might use it as part of their creative practice. But even if they don't intend to use it as part of the practice, understanding that what impact might that have on them? What are the positive impacts and what are the negative impacts as well? Because it is something that everybody is talking about, but actually you need to kind of get hands-on with it. You need to experiment with it, and it's good to do it in a safe environment as well, safe and creative environment. So we ran that course last month, and it's been so popular that we're going to be doing it again in October. So yeah, that's another one of the areas that I'm working on.
Fantastic.
And I should say as well, I know that the stuff that we've been talking about today is really been thinking about sort of that high level stuff of how could AI help learners with dyslexia, or how could AI help learners in general. But I would say, if you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, okay, but what actually are the apps I should use, or what are the tools that I should use? If you go into my website, Digital Skills Education, you go on our newsletter, I will email out after we do this conference the list of the apps and tools that have been sent in to me by teachers. So that will be a much more practical list of, maybe you want to check this one out, maybe you want to try that. And the good news is all the ones that I'm recommending are either built into your phones or devices, or can be downloaded for free as well. So none of the ones that I'm talking about at the conference you have to pay any licenses for as well. So if you've been listening to this and you think, great, but practically, what can I do? Then yeah, get in touch with me and I can send you those out.
Well, what we'll do is we'll put it in the show notes below.
Brilliant.
So on whatever device you're listening to this on, YouTube, just scroll up through the info and there'll be links, or on Apple Podcasts, just swipe up right now and you'll see the show notes appear, and you'll see the blue links to Craig's resources there. And you've also got a book you mentioned for kids.
Yes.
What's that?
Yes, I write a series of books called Computer Coding for Kids. They're labelled, the author is labelled as Carol Vorderman, but she doesn't write all the content of it. So I do a lot of the coding in it. So Computer Coding for Kids, Python projects for kids as well. And then if you're into all of that, there's a new book coming out at the start of next year called From AI to Wi-Fi, which is how the internet works. So I now write the books that I wish I had when I was 10, 11 and 12, which are non-fiction books that are, the publishers that I work with really work well with illustrators. So they're very visual books. There's not huge amounts of writing in them, which is quite challenging when I have to summarize how this version of AI works within 30 words. And then I have to make sure I want to be accurate and all that as well. But really good for young learners to encourage them to get into, if they're into technology, and it's nice to have a book to read through as well, learning from that too. So again, if you've got any children, that would make a great present for after Christmas. So it'll be out in January.
Oh, well, they could buy the first two for Christmas to whet their appetite.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, there's a whole there's quite a few books now, so yeah, they'll be able to get into that, and it's in libraries as well. So anyone if you've got access to the school library or a local library, they're in there too.
Fabulous.
Brilliant. I think that it's been really interesting talking to you and starting to. And the thing is, there's no way that we're going to cover everything to do with AI and supporting people who have dyslexia within one podcast, because this is such a big area that I take it this is the type of thing that people will be returning to over time as well. And by the time this time next year, there'll be more apps, there'll be more people talking about it as well. But I think it is a really exciting area to explore, and I'm looking forward to the conference in November. I'm looking forward to, because I know that when I go there, I'll be sharing all this stuff that either I've used or teachers have used. But what I also love is I know that there's going to be people in the room there with me who are going to come up to me and say, have you heard of this? And I'll be like, no, I haven't. Please show me it. Show me it now. So I'll be taking all that on board too.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think we learn from each other, and hopefully what we've spoken about today will help perhaps break down some of the nervousness, give people some ideas of what they could be sort of dipping their toes into the water with, and hopefully just a realization that actually there's a lot of accessible tools out there right now that could make a real difference. So it's brilliant, Craig. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's been really helpful. I mean, I've learnt stuff. I'm not actually that techie for someone who runs a tech company, so I'm not up to speed with everything my phone does. So I'm off to have a play and see what the accessibility features are.
It's been lovely to chat with you both.
Yeah, likewise.
Until next time, Craig, thank you very much. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.